Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Alan. My name is Generation Tech, and yes, today we're going to be talking about the Kenobi TV series once again, specifically about what's going to happen in Part 4, and also there are going to be spoilers from Part 3 of Kenobi, so if you haven't seen it yet, because, I don't know, you haven't had the chance to, or maybe you're just against, Disney's monopolization of our childhood and you don't want to subscribe to Disney Plus, I get it. Fair warning though. So at the end of Obi Wan Kenobi's relatively disappointing encounter with Darth Vader, Imperial Officer Tala Dureth comes to the rescue with her trusty loader droid Ned B. The two are part of a secret underground railroad movement that smuggles Jedi to the safety of the Outer Rim. They've built and maintained a series of different safe houses all across the galaxy. Now at the end of that episode, we find out that Tala will be bringing the scorched Obi-Wan to the planet of Jabim. Jabim is a planet that many hardcore Clone Wars fans will recognize immediately, especially the older fans who saw the prequels in theater. Wow, the older fans who saw the prequels in theater. We used to be the younger fans. But anyway, if you know the nuanced details of what happens during what's known as the Battle of Jabim, you know exactly why it's such an amazing setting for both Obi Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader to return to in this next episode. So the planet Jabim is located in the Outer Rim and located on a relatively isolated hyperspace lane. Galactically speaking, it's pretty close to the Separatist Heartland areas as well. During the Republic era, planets like Jabim were mostly ignored by the core worlds. In some ways, the Galactic Republic was like this gigantic Ponzi scheme. Only the early adopters in the core really benefited from status and political power. The further out you go, the later you join, the less likely you'll have any influence at all. And so the Jabim were paying taxes into a system where they literally didn't have any representation. But still, the Republic was the only power broker in the galaxy, and so you didn't have any alternatives until the rise of the Separatist Alliance. Now, Jabim was a terrestrial planet known for its temperate yet extremely hostile climate. The upper atmosphere was electrically charged and ionized and full of massive storms, making it incredibly difficult for ships to fly through it using repulsor lifts. It also scattered communications and limited the visibility from orbit. To make matters worse, these storms led to almost constant torrential rainfalls. In an average year, Jabim only experiences 5 days worth of no rain, and these breaks in the constant rain usually only last around an hour. So yeah, Jabim is terrible. It's one of the worst places to fight a war, and it makes Mimbom seem like almost a nice place to visit. Now, before we continue, all the stuff I'll be talking about here comes from the Legends era, specifically a series of comics that came out in 2003. That's before even Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith came out. Back then, the only Clone Wars cartoon was the one that was made by the Samurai Jack guys. There's no Captain Rex, just his much more brutal and psychopathic counterpart Alpha. Because of the Kenobi series and some comic that came out 5 years ago set during the First Order and Resistance War, Jabim is now officially canon. The whole reason why the expanded universe is called Legends and not canon, for instance, is because Disney actually does borrow a lot from Legends and brings it back into canon eventually. And although they don't usually bring in all the little minor details, they usually keep the bigger picture ideas still intact. But we won't really know how much of the Jabim story that I'm about to tell you will stay intact. You guys will have to just wait until Wednesday when the next episode comes out. When the Separatist crisis gave rise to the Confederacy of Independent Systems, Jabim, just like Mon Cala and Onderon, experienced a civil war. Although in this case, the pro-separatist faction had some pretty good reasons for joining the Confederacy. Not only were they closer to them, they could also help them develop the very lucrative minerals that were underneath the surface of the planet. Their leader, Alto Stratus, had grown disillusioned with the Jedi and the Republic after repeated failures by these organizations to assist Jabim in its many times of need. For instance, when the brain rot plague hit Jabim, the Republic sent no help. No medical supplies, no humanitarian aid, no Jedi to serve as healers. They also didn't intervene when a bunch of Trandoshan bandits started raiding the planet. Alto Stratus was also directly affected. His parents had been killed by Lithian pirates who had besieged his home village. Now, Stratus was a fearsome military leader, and he was also a great orator. He would make rousing speeches asking the Jabim why they must pay taxes to a central government that essentially ignores them and leaves them completely defenseless. Alto Stratus would eventually start a coup and kill most of the loyalist members of Congress who couldn't escape. The Republic tried to de-escalate the situation by sending the Alderaanian diplomatic corps, but all attempts to stop the Jabim from joining the CIS would fail. The discovery of massive mineral deposits on Jabim and the Confederacy's interest in those deposits are ultimately what made the Republic change its mind and become more involved in the planet. When they understood that the Separatist Alliance was actively funding Stratus's forces, they decided to intervene. This would be around 22 BBY, relatively early on in the Clone Wars. Obi Wan Kenobi would be assigned to the role of theater commander, and he would bring along with his apprentice at the time, Padawan Anakin Skywalker. It should be noted that in the canon timeline, Anakin was promoted to Jedi Knight shortly after the Battle of Jabim. Now, Obi Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker were joined by several other Jedi Masters and their Padawan, and unfortunately, most of these individuals had very little battlefield experience. Republic forces were initially very gung-ho when they landed on the planet. They linked up with the local Jabim loyalist movement and immediately set up their command center known as Shelter Base. The Jedi only initially encountered light local opposition forces and no separatist droids at all. Spurred on by their successes, Obi-Wan issued a command to Republic forces to continue attacking outposts in search for Alto Stratus. This is exactly what the Jabim nationalists wanted Obi-Wan to do. They wanted the Republic to essentially spread out their forces to make them much easier to pick off. Not only were the clones spread out thin, their vehicles, even their walkers, had gotten stuck in the torrential downpour and thick mud. Alto Stratus, surrounded by his Nimbus commandos, would lead the counterattack on the Republic Command Center Shelter Base all by himself. During the attack, they managed to destroy a massive walker, which presumably killed Obi-Wan Kenobi and the clone Alpha. Like in most wars, the initial flurry of rapid advances and counterattacks would eventually get bogged down into a much more conservative defensive war, especially in a terrain that's full of mud and rain. The reality was this planet was extremely hostile to any type of armor, mechanized, or even air unit movement. And even though the Jedi were quickly learning how to adapt to the situation, they were taking massive losses. 4 weeks into the war, 18 Jedi lay dead, and an entire legion's worth of clones, 9,000 individuals, had been killed. Losses on the Jabim side were unknown, but they were fighting for the survival of their planet. They definitely had the upper hand. The situation was especially bad for the Jedi. So many Masters and Jedi Knights had died that a cobbled together unit known as the Padawan Pack was formed out of masterless Padawans, and they most likely would have been doomed had it not been for the leadership of Anakin Skywalker, who, remember, at this point, believed his master was dead. Eventually, Republic losses became too high, and the Jedi in command ordered a retreat to the southern hemisphere of the planet. Along the way, the Republic retreat convoy would come under attack several times and fall victims to all sorts of traps and landmines. The Padawan Pack, led by Skywalker, would help guard the flanks from larger separatist units that were harassing the convoy. When the Jedi finally reach the southern hemisphere, the separatist droid army arrives with massive amounts of ground forces, tanks, and several assassination droids. It's at this point the Republic realizes that they need to make a full-on retreat from the planet. But with Alto Stratus' main force heading towards the evac center, the Padawan Pack must be called upon once again to hold the line so that the evacuation can be complete. And so one by one they get gunned down in heroic last stands. This is roughly 40 days into the war, 40 days of continuous fighting, rain, and death. The Padawan who have survived up until this point have drastically changed. They were no longer peacekeepers or monks. They fully embraced warfare. As they get gunned down one by Stratus' forces, this becomes even more apparent. One Padawan Window Warble Nen gets blasted to the ground and is about to get run over by a Separatist Hellfire tank. He ends up detonating a bandolier full of detonators strapped to his chest, taking out that tank. Another Padawan, Zulshis, has become just as comfortable wielding a DC-15S carbine as she is with wielding a lightsaber. She ultimately gets crushed by a walker that gets destroyed. Then you have Padawan Mac Lotar and Kastad. They have completely rejected the Jedi Code of non-attachment, and they choose love in the foxholes before getting killed by an incoming missile. Finally, we have Aubrey Wynn, who gets shot down by Alto Stratus himself. While she falls to the ground, she plunges her sabers into the leader of the Jabim nationalist movement and kills him. The last Padawan, no, the last Jedi standing on Jabim, was now Anakin. The Padawan Pack's defiant and heroic last stand had caused Jabim nationalists to pause their offensive. The death of Alto Stratus had brought the Republic just enough time for the clones to withdraw. Anakin now was in charge of all Republic military forces on the planet and therefore had to inform their allies, the Jabim loyalists, that they're leaving. This couldn't have been an easy moment for the young Padawan. The great sense of betrayal he must have felt, and the general pointlessness of all the death and destruction that had been sowed on this planet was starting to shape his view of the Republic. And so Anakin's first command ends with him standing soaked and covered in mud in the door of a dropship as he watches the Jabim loyalists pelt him with rocks. It is a planet that I'm sure he vowed to never return to once again. A planet full of horror, tragedy, and regret. Obi Wan Kenobi, on the other hand, was saved from most of the trauma of the battle. Remember how they thought he had died early on in the combats? Well, he simply had been taken as a POW by Asajj Ventress. Now he was wearing a gimp mask, and I'm not sure if that's any better. In the last year of the war, the Outer Rim siege would occur, and the Republic would take over Jabim, and the Empire shortly after that would take over the Republic. Now, Darth Vader clearly has some really bad history with this planet. I think this is one of the reasons why the anti-Imperials hide their safe house on this planet in the first place. It'll be interesting to see how much of this lore is preserved, because in the case with The Mandalorian, when they reintroduced the legendary planet of Tython, they basically didn't talk much about anything. I think this will be a little different here. I could be wrong, but hopefully we'll get to see some Clone Wars flashbacks with Obi-Wan and Anakin. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys think, and please enjoy the next episode of Kenobi. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our coverage. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to democracy, or to the Republic. To democracy? Yeah.